Hello and welcome back to another video. Today here again on the Crew Motorfest to take a bit of a closer look at the three starter car options to try and see which one is actually the best vehicle. Now, you don't actually use the car that you choose initially for any events, so it doesn't really matter which one you choose, if I'm being honest. This is more just out of interest to find out how the three options compare to one another. Just like a lot of games, the options include one European car, one Japanese car, and one American car. In this case, the new-ish BMW Z4, the Honda S2000, and the brand new Ford Mustang convertible. Now, if you played the beta, then there was an older Mustang as a sort of placeholder, I kind of imagine, which in the full version has now been replaced with the new model and a convertible one at that. So now all three starter cars are convertibles. In the beta, I actually chose the Honda S2000, but in the full version, I went for that all-new Mustang, which from what I've heard from others who have played this game, seems to be the most popular choice, mostly because it's a new vehicle, where the other two, I believe, were both in the Crew 2. Whichever one you choose, though, you can then purchase the other two starter cars. The Motorfest edition of those models is purchasable, which will be exactly the same as the starter car you get, but is also exactly the same as the normal versions of those cars. They're just called Motorfest edition and have that sort of painted livery on them. But they're both available, the two options that you don't go for, to purchase for 500,500 credits, if you want to purchase either of them. So this has cost me just over 1 million credits to get both of them to make this comparison. Anyway, the BMW, the first option, produces 335 horsepower and weighs 1,610 kilos with a perf level of 439, so that car sort of sits in the middle in all of the stats. The Honda is the least powerful at 240 horsepower, but only weighs 1,295 kilos, so it's substantially lighter than the other two options, but does have the lowest overall perf level of 390. And the Ford, as you might expect, is the most powerful, with 446 horsepower, but is of course also the heaviest at 1,780 kilos, although it's not as much heavier than the BMW as you might expect. But it has an overall perf level of 446. So on paper, the Mustang should be the best. So let's put all three of them head to head to see which one is actually the best. Before we compare how the three cars perform, I think we should take a quick look at the customization options for the different vehicles to see if that influences the decision at all, to see if one of them is any better than the others. Now, having chosen the Mustang as my car, I have sort of modified it a bit, but all I've done to it is change the colour of the interior so far. So let's jump in and choose some visual parts. And it's just interior, which I've already done. Perfect. For the BMW, I've gone for the standard red manufacturer colour. In terms of other options, though, let's have a look. So yeah, not quite as good as the Mustang, but being the Crew, there's still tons of options. And last but not least, the Honda S2000, which just like in the beta, I've gone for the black colour. So not too bad. There are some super wild options for this one. So I don't know. I think the BMW has, I would say, the worst customization, and it's between the Mustang and the S2000. I think the S2000 might just about take it, but yeah, customization is a very personal thing, so I'll let you decide based on what you've seen of the three cars, which you prefer in that department. So I think we should probably get on to seeing how they actually compare in terms of performance. So, let's start with the obvious test. Which one has the highest top speed? We'll be starting from the same point in all three. Let's start with the Mustang. Once I'm into a good gear, I will boost, just because we've only got limited space here to get up to speed. So, into 6th, we've boosted. So I'm going to kind of just floor it without boost for a while. See what the maximum we kind of get. I know we used it to get up there, but that was for acceleration rather than increasing the top speed. So when the top speed seems to be stuck, that'll be what we call it for its sort of natural top speed, and then boosted top speed. So it seems to be 155 without boost. So now, once we've got onto a nice straight, $167 is the most I saw with boost. Okay, so now the turn of the Z4. It seems to be 153 without using boost, so slightly slower than the Mustang. Let's see. Once we're around here, what happens if we hit? It's 170 I saw with boost, though, which is slightly more than the Mustang. I think it's 3 miles an hour slower without boost and 3 miles an hour faster with boost. Interesting. And the Honda, which is going to struggle here a little bit, I think, with its lack of horsepower. So let's see how close it can get to the other two. 154. And I get 55 at the moment. It's 55. Okay, so it's matched the Mustang. I think that's all we're going to see without using boost. And 168 with boost. They are all incredibly, incredibly close to each other in top speed. So yeah, I'm not sure you'd actually realistically be able to tell the difference once you're using them for anything. Interesting. So there we go. All of them incredibly, incredibly similar, within 2 miles an hour of each other at normal top speed, and within 3 miles an hour of each other with the boosted top speed, essentially, which is where their gears stop. That's all to do with gearing, where the boost stops, basically. But yeah, I think the Honda was the surprise there, managing to get the same top speed as the Mustang. I know it's not a perfectly straight road, and I didn't boost it in turn and traffic and everything, so it's not an entirely fair test, but they did seem to all have stopped accelerating at the speed I'd hit without boost, and then with boost until they bounced the limiter. So I think they're all much of a muchness, really. But yeah, the Honda being similar to the other two is a surprise in itself. Okay, so due to the unique way this game works, although I've gone to a drag racing event, you can't enter it in anything that's not officially a drag car. So instead what I've done is I've set a waypoint a quarter of a mile away, which is where the end of the runway is. There's a line there. So I'm going to have to sort of do this manually. I'm not going to use boost for this to try and keep it fair. So let's start with the BMW and see how it goes. I'm going to have to count myself in and accelerate and time at the same time. 3, 2, 1, go! Okay, we've got a 12.53 for the BMW, which has now found itself in the ocean. Okay, now the same in the Mustang then. 3, 2, 1, go. and that's a 12.9. It's slightly slower. I'm not sure how accurate I'm being with this timer, but that was definitely slower. And finally, the Honda, which again, I think might struggle here, although it proved me wrong in the top speed. So 3, 2, 1, go. And yeah, rather unsurprisingly, that was a 13.8, quite a lot slower than the other two. So then, so far, the BMW and Mustang are dead even winning this one, but the two tests so far have been straight lines, which have been a little bit unfair on the poor little Honda that lacks power. So now let's see, kind of more importantly, which is fastest around an actual circuit. I'm going to be using the Shinjuku style route for this, which is the final race from the Japanese playlist, because so far it's the route I've felt most comfortable driving, and felt like I kind of know it reasonably well after just completing that playlist fairly recently. It will though be set to afternoon without the all distracting neons everywhere, however cool they were and however stunning that looked. The event's set to 3 laps because you can't really change it, and you can't turn the AI off either, so I ran it on a fairly easy difficulty to get clear of the AI quickly on the first lap, and then have 2 laps to get the best lap time from for each car. Before taking the 3 cars around, I did a sighter run in the C63 AMG, just to get a feel for the circuit and everything again, so that it was fair on the 3 cars, so that the one that went last didn't have an advantage. Then I set off in the Mustang first, which set well, hard to tell because I hadn't raced the other two at this point, a benchmark time of 1:36.623 as its best lap. So then I set off in the BMW, which lacked power a little bit compared to the Mustang, but didn't feel too bad in the straights, but did feel a lot more nimble in the corners, and that set an absolutely blistering time of 1:29.612, beating the Mustang quite substantially. Finally then, it was the poor little Honda, which, as we saw from the previous couple of things, is down on power, particularly struggling in the quarter mile there, and this is rated a lot lower because of that. And it did very well, almost matching the Mustang with a 1:36.806. Remember, the Mustang did a 1:36.6, so it was a couple of tenths of a second slower, which is incredibly close given how different those two cars are. The BMW, though, being miles ahead of the other two around the circuit, that thing just had the right balance of power and grip and everything to be, well, fantastic around here. Surprisingly, the Honda was the worst to drive, I thought. Although it had really good sort of turn-in to the corners, it seemed a bit too sharp, and the back kept sort of stepping out. So I'm not really sure why, I just didn't get on with how that thing drove particularly. So there was a couple of times I nearly spun, which cost quite a bit of time, I would say. So without that, it could well have beaten the Ford. It just felt a little bit too unstable to get the most out of, basically. But like I say, the BMW was much faster than the other two, getting a 1:29 with the other twos getting a 1:36. So there we go, those are the 3 options for starter car here in the Crew Motorfest, and how they perform in different respects. The BMW didn't have quite as good customization as the other two, I would probably say, with the Honda having the options that I thought were the best, but customization is really all down to personal taste, so I'll leave that one up to you guys on which one you think the customization looks best on. The top speeds were so similar that it makes no difference at all, which I really didn't expect. That was super surprising. I don't know if that's just something to do with how this game works, but yeah, that was quite interesting, so complete dead heat there. In the quarter mile and the circuit race, the BMW was the fastest of the 3, not quite by such a big margin in the quarter mile, but around the track it really was a lot faster than the other two. The Mustang finishing second in both of those events, not too far behind the BMW in the drag race, but quite a bit slower around the circuit. And then the poor little Honda really struggled with power, and it was breaking traction in the corners, making it a little bit slower than the Mustang around the circuit, and a lot slower than both the other cars in the quarter mile. So yeah, the Honda really not doing very well here. But overall, I would have to say the BMW is the best performing of the three cars, which in the end is what we were trying to figure out here. So, yeah, BMW is probably the best. Then Mustang not too far off that, and poor little Honda really struggling because it's down on power, and to be fair, is rated quite a lot lower than the other two. However, having said all of that, do remember that it doesn't really matter which option you pick, as none of the playlist events require you to use your own car at the start, so it doesn't really matter because by the time you're using your own car, you'll have saved up enough to, well, buy another one, but also you'll have gained performance parts to put on whichever car you've chosen, making it, well, they'll all end up the same essentially once you've maxed them, so yeah, it really doesn't matter. This is especially true if you've imported your cars from the Crew 2, as you'll probably barely use your starter car at all, because you'll use your faster, more exotic cars that you've imported from the previous title. I personally would still have chosen the Mustang, for example, had I known that the BMW was slightly better, because it's the only new addition to the series, and I think that makes it a bit more exciting to me than the other two. Anyway, there we go. The BMW is the best of the three, if you want to just buy the fastest of the three cars available, but in the end, like I say, just pick whichever one you prefer, as the game doesn't really get you to use them for anything. So yeah, it's all down to personal choice in the end. It's just always quite interesting to compare the three options in, well, any new game really. And that is going to be all for today's video. So thank you very much for watching, and I will be back with the next one very soon.